Well, to begin, I'm curious, what can you tell me about this room?
Rectangular.
Rectangular, good, okay.
People in it.
People, what else?
Bulbs burn out every once in a while.
Okay, we have technical difficulties in this room. Whiteboards.
Projector.
We have a projector.
There's a pointy stick that never gets used except when Dave Wiley presents, and then he uses it every single time.
So all of these things in the room have been placed here intentionally, maybe some of them unintentionally, and all of them reflect certain beliefs that people had, in this room in particular, about education, because we're at a university. So let's just take this podium, for example. What beliefs and attitudes did the people have about education who designed this podium, who put it here in this corner of the room? What were they probably thinking when they did that? Andy?
I believe this room will probably be used for a priesthood meeting.
Okay. Formal, very formal things.
That instructors have social anxiety and want to hide in the corner.
Okay, maybe so, yeah. Back in the very back?
That you'll have something you want to reference, maybe printed material.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, so there's some very clear beliefs about authority and structure that this podium represents. And I am free to move around a little bit as the person up here. And I apologize to the camera operators, but the further back I go, the more anxious you might feel. You might start to feel that I'm violating some of the norms of this room. And if I keep coming back, and if I spent my whole presentation back here, it might actually make you feel quite uncomfortable, right?
It might make me feel
Because this room was set up for a certain purpose, and when we don't follow, the norms of that purpose, we kind of sense that something doesn't feel right. Even with all of our beliefs about education being fluid and fun and informal, it can be very informal, we fall into the constructs that this room provides for us and feel very comfortable when people kind of accept and live into the roles that the structures, all of these structures, the podium, the projector, even these chairs that are movable and tables that are movable are set up facing this direction. All of those things are set up to reinforce a certain set of behaviors. We see this in all kinds of rooms. We go to a room like this, and in our culture, we kind of know what to expect in a room like this. We kind of know where we're supposed to sit, what we're supposed to do, how loud we're supposed to talk, which is very different in a room like this. Again, even if we've never worked in one of these rooms, or even really been in one ourselves, we kind of know, just based on what it looks like and kind of the affordances of it, what it's for and how we behave. Which one of the two rooms is loud talking acceptable in? I'll just ask you. This one, right? Which one of these rooms would you probably be asked to take off your shoes? The first, right? We kind of know these things. We know the roles. Some rooms are designed by default. Other rooms are designed intentionally. Most rooms are a mix. And that's the way it is in most design situations. Some things are designed intentionally. Some things are designed by default. People just threw some things together. But most are a mix. Today what I want to talk about is I want to talk about what we can do, how we can learn to be the kind of designers that have more of the intentional aspects in our designs. That if we can develop the habits, if we can develop patterns of being a designer to attend to all of the myriad decisions that go into a room like that warehouse room or the ceiling room, all of those things work together for us to create the feel that the people designing that room wanted. That's the kind of designers we want to be. And I want to talk today about some habits that we can engender in ourselves to help us be those kinds of designers. In introduction to that, I just want to read a quote that kind of frames this discussion and frames these attitudes and these habits. This is from a book called The Spirit of the Disciplines, and I'll talk about that term disciplines in a little bit more, but just so you have a reference for the quote. Think of certain young people who idolize an outstanding baseball player. They want nothing so much as to pitch or run or hit as well as their idol. So what do? When they are playing in a baseball game, they all try to behave exactly as their favorite baseball star does. The star is well known for sliding headfirst into bases, so the kids do too. The star holds his bat above his head, so the kids do too. These young people try anything and everything their idol does, hoping to be like him. They buy the type of shoes he wears, the same glove he uses, the same bat. And then a question. Will the kids succeed in performing like the star? We all know the answer quite well. We know they won't succeed if all they try to be is like him in the game, no matter how gifted they may be in their own way, and we all understand why. The star performer himself didn't achieve his excellence by trying to behave a certain way only during the game. Instead, he chose an overall life of preparation of mind and body, pouring all his energies into that total preparation to provide a foundation in the body's automatic responses and strength for his conscious efforts during the game. Those exquisite responses we see, the amazing timing and strength such an athlete displays, aren't produced and maintained in the short hours of the game itself. They are available to the athlete for those short and all-important hours because of a daily regimen no one sees. For example, the proper diet and rest and exercises for specific muscles are not part of the game itself, but without them, the athlete certainly would not be able to perform outstandingly. Some of these daily habits may even seem silly to us, but the successful athlete knows that his disciplines must be undertaken, and undertaken rightly, or all his natural talents and best efforts would go down in defeat to others who have disciplined themselves in preparation for game time. So what's your game time? What's your game time?
On the job or?
On the job, in the classroom, in that, that studio I saw, over in the library. That's maybe a hybrid, preparation, but it's also kind of game time for you, right? Any others? Just for your own personal situations. What are some of your game times in the back?
Presenting a product to stakeholders?
Yeah, presenting to stakeholders. All of those are game time. Very good. So my premise today is if you aren't prepared before you go into game time, you won't be as successful as you can be, no matter how talented you are. If you aren't preparing yourself and aren't preparing yourself regularly outside of game time, you won't be the performer during game time that you otherwise could be. And that's what I'm calling disciplines. So my presentation today is developing design disciplines. Design disciplines are simple activities that you can incorporate into your everyday life that help make you a stronger, more effective, a better designer. And my purpose today is to practice these things so that you leave the room starting to develop some of these disciplines. And I'm suggesting some, but really what I want is for you to come up with your own and start living up to your own habits. I hope that some of the ones we talk about today are helpful, but really develop your own habits and develop your own patterns of living so that when it comes game time, you're prepared to be successful in that. This is important for a lot of reasons, one of which ties very closely to my research, so I just want to talk about that for a moment. All of us, from the most novice designers to the most skilled, all of us face pressures to do less than our best. All of us face pressures that, if we aren't careful and aware of them, will constrain us into instructional habits, instructional patterns that aren't powerful enough to actually achieve what we want to achieve. Have you felt that? Have you gone into a situation and felt, they really don't want me to apply this theory that I think is so great that I learned in school. They really just want me to fill out the form. Have you felt those kinds of things? That's what I've studied in my research and my professional career. When designers implement innovations, they often find that there are these forces that draw them away from the excellence that they pursue. I call it gravity, technological gravity. Gravity is ubiquitous, right? You can't overcome it. All we can do is resist it and maybe apply some forces that counteract it for a while, but gravity is always working on us. And that's the way it is for us as designers. This technological gravity or design gravity is always working on us, no matter how skilled we are. And how do we overcome it? It's these habits, these patterns. I found this gravity in decades going back to the 50s, the 60s and 70s, into the 80s, 90s, and today. And yeah, it's really easy to find similar looking pictures. But when you really look at the technologies, teaching machines, early computer-based instruction, the online forms, MOOCs, things today, they start to tend to take on the same characteristics. It's a very clear pattern in the research I've done. The same characteristics happen again and again and again. And often it just seems that we have new tools to implement the same instructional patterns that we've always implemented. Some reasons for it: distracted focus. We abandon our goals because we get excited about other things. Status quo adherence. Under times of stress, we kind of retreat to where we feel safe. It could happen for oversimplification. We start to pursue simplification as a goal in itself. And so we start to abandon some of the ideals of which we started. So what I really want to talk about today, though, is, understanding these things and understanding how you might fall into it personally through some of these examples. I want to talk about how to resist it, specifically through developing some disciplines. It takes active effort to resist. Our default mode is not to run 26.2 miles at a time. But we do, because we train. Our default mode is not to sit down at a piano and play a beautiful sonata for 20 minutes. But we do, because we prepare. Any questions to this point, or comments, or thoughts?
There seems to be an assumption that looking at a screen is bad. Just an example.
Yeah.
How do you tell the difference between what's gravity junk versus this is actually proved and tried through time,
Yeah.
and it's
That's a
not
great
gravity, this is what works, and so
That's a
we should
great
stick
question.
with it. And
It's a great question, and it's actually a hard question to answer in the abstract, because it comes back to what were your original goals. And I cherry-picked some screens. Of course I cherry-picked the screens because it's my presentation, so I get the right to do that. But I can tell you that a lot of the people who went into those innovations had lofty goals. Teaching machines is an innovation from the 1950s, 1960s that was going to transform education, that was going to revolutionize the entire educational system. The little children from 2 and 3 years old would be experts in math and reading, beating their parents by the time that they were teenagers. That didn't happen for a lot of reasons, partially because as they started implementing the ideas, they fell back to these forms and patterns that they were already familiar with and that weren't powerful enough to help them. So look at your goals. Are your goals being met by the techniques you're using? Great. If they are, great. Keep pursuing them. Thank you. Good question. Good comment. Well, 3 disciplines. I want to talk about 3 disciplines today. The first of these disciplines is imagination. Imagination is the ability to realize, make real the unexpressed, basically to think about things that aren't there right now. Can you help me pass out? A couple of you just help me pass out these. Make sure that people get a copy. And a great discipline, all of these disciplines are going to be very simple. If you want to beef up your imaginative skills, imaginative is core to design, it's key to design, right? If things were great, if everything people wanted was in front of them, they wouldn't be asking designers to help them, probably. So seeing a situation and saying something else can be here that's not here right now is kind of a core essence of design, right? And that's imagination, the ability to think of those things. And we have to evaluate them later on, yes, but first we have to think of them. So this first one is imagination. And the discipline is the is-like discipline. To think of a situation and say, it's kind of like this, or it could be like this. And it's okay to get fun and crazy and wild in this. Is the situation that you're going in, I'm just going to speak abstractly for a second, then I'll show you some concrete examples. Is the situation that you're going in, is it like a rap concert? Is it like a stand-up comedian's presentation? Is it like a church? Is it like whatever else? Fill in the blank. Is it like a football game? Or could it be like any of those things? And then there's space there on the handout. Just start writing down. If it is like a football game, what might that imply? If it were like a concert, What might that imply? And what do you come up with? It's okay, whatever you want to come up with. As Dr. Graham mentioned, right now I work at Deseret Book. Our flagship product is called Deseret Bookshelf. I hope some of you use it, or have heard of it, or seen it. It's an e-book reader. When I came on the team a couple of years ago, it looked very much like a bookshelf reader. You know, there's wood panels on the screen, and books were placed in slots on the screen. And I wanted to do it, is this like exercise? So with my team, we talked about, is this like, and this is actually a common thing in LDS media, is this like a Urim and Thummim? That's actually very, very common to talk about digital technologies. Maybe some of you have done it in your classes. But I said, let's do this a little differently. Let's say, is this like the Jewish mystical version of the Urim and Thummim, Jewish Kabbalah? This is the Kabbalistic tree of life. There's a rich history in Judaism, and it sounds absurd saying it, I know, but we did it, and I'm going to show you some of the results in a second. There's this rich tradition in Judaism of mystical objects and mystical behaviors and magic and all kinds of things, and the Urim and Thummim is one of their objects. And this is a tree of life, and you can see all the colors, and the colors blend together and start to think of things. And so we started to think of our app in that way. If we're trying to bring light to people, can we demonstrate that in our graphic design? What else happens with a Urim and Thummim? Well, you can see things that aren't in front of you. So people have ebooks on their devices. They might have bought 100 of them, 50 of them. But what happens if we let them search ebooks that they didn't own? So you type in a phrase, and all 3,000 ebooks that Deseret Book sells, what if we showed them results from all of them, whether they owned them or not? That might be kind of interesting, like a Urim and Thummim, right? Eventually, we moved into things like, you can see some tabs up maybe at the screen. Hopefully you can. That just started to feel kind of heavy. Urim and Thummims don't have tabs, so we took off the tabs. We talked about things very technically, fast library-wide search. So we change it, to seek and find answers. That feels more like a Urim and Thummim. You're going to seek for something. We cleaned up things and put a lot more white space in it. Honestly, we even started using white iPads, as you can see in our advertising, because white means light. So a very interesting and fun and kind of absurd conversation. What would happen if we thought about things like a Urim and Thummim actually bore fruit in a lot of ways? What do you think? Some of yours. Talk about some of your projects in this is this like idea. Any ideas come to mind? What are projects that you're working on? And maybe the group can help us brainstorm a little bit. Bring up a project and we can brainstorm some is this like kind of things. All right, you've been volunteered.
So I'm building a video game for teaching beginning Arabic learners, and it's a semester-long game where they will talk to the computer and it will speak back to them, and they solve a mystery throughout the game. But I don't know what to ask. I don't know what the is like should be.
Well, what could it be? Let's all help him. What could it be?
It is not like Space Invaders at all.
It's like Lehi's journey through the desert to the land bountiful.
Okay, the journey to Bountiful, Lehi's journey to Bountiful. What else could it be like?
Peninsula.
Yeah.
That's
What else could it be like? Write these things down, man. I'm serious. You be writing these things down.
An Arab market with all the percent.
Okay, a bazaar. Yeah, it could be a bazaar. Very good. What else could it be like?
Space travel.
Space travel.
And it doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. It could be the journey and the bazaar.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, the idea of this is you just come up with these things and then start writing down characteristics. And we won't do that now. But Matt, your next job is if this were like Lehi's journey, what would some characteristics of that be? If it was like a bazaar, what would it be? And then you can start mixing and matching and putting things together in really interesting and fun and creative ways. Now, we've talked about this in context of your projects, but if this becomes a discipline for you, what does that imply? Do you only do it during your projects? I hope not. If you come into a room like this, what is this room like? What could it be like? If you're at the store, what's Walmart like? What could it be like? What else could it be like? And if you cultivate that habit, often it becomes very natural to do it when you enter design situations. Any questions, or maybe time for one question unless you...
Well, so like you're saying that we ask like what is it like and what does that imply? Do you ever like do the contrary and ask like what does it not imply?
Yes.
What are characteristics not like that stuff?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. The idea is to just start generating ideas, and lots of ideas. So what is this not like? Is a great way to start generating ideas as well.
So how do you come up with, there's obviously an infinite number of things that you could compare it to.
Right.
And some would be, yield maybe very productive things, and some might be useless. And so, I know this, we're trying to do divergent thinking,
Right.
but if the thinking becomes too divergent, then you get lost in the. So do you have any? I mean, why did you choose, for example, Urim and Thummim instead of, spaghetti dinner?
Right.
And how do you get people to select those initial things to compare that are going to yield some kind of insight or meaningful,
Yeah. So how do you avoid just start swimming in details? It sounds like what a lot of your question could be about. Or how do you start driving towards productivity? I think some of it is just you gaining experience with it. When you start throwing the ball against the side of the barn as a baseball player, it goes wild, and that's okay. Because how else are you going to learn to start what it feels like in your arm to get closer to the target? And it's good to have a mentor there to help you, and to maybe evaluate and give you feedback on the position of your arm and how it's dropping and how your elbow might be dropping. But ultimately, you just have to start doing those things again and again and have the target that you're trying to hit for. And I think it's okay when you're starting to kind of be really wild and all over the place, and find a mentor who can help you shape those conversations to see that they become as productive as quickly as possible.
One of the things you would also look for is shared function. For instance, your web interface is going to communicate, and it's actually a sales thing. So anything along those themes will lead you in a productive direction. Your Thummim is a communication device.
Yeah, so maybe more, take a level of abstraction almost. What else communicates? Walkie-talkies communicate. How is our app like a walkie-talkie? What else communicates, One last quote, there's a book called The Imagineering Workout. It's just kind of one of those fluffy things you pick up at Disneyland, but there's a great quote in it. Select your creative challenge, then make a list of creative souls who could inspire a solution, such as Georgia O'Keeffe, Albert Einstein, or Ernest Hemingway. So this is another way. Is it like Albert Einstein's work? Is it like Ernest Hemingway's work? A little more abstract, not concrete like a product, but still some inspiration. Select one or more people from the list. Reflect on their unique talents, research their work, let them breathe life into your thinking and imagination. Now find your own answers by letting your imagination play with multiple solutions. The second discipline is being creation-oriented, driving change through continual cycles of creation. So if you're prototyping, this is an example of being creation-oriented. But it's not the only thing that you can be doing to be creation-oriented. Can you think of some other, what else other than a rapid prototype might be creation-oriented? Did any of you see the movie this summer called Love and Mercy about Brian Wilson? Oh, I should have just shown that for a couple hours because that's just a great movie. Brian Wilson, the lead singer of the Beach Boys, there is a scene in there. He's kind of down in the dumps. He sits down at his piano and he starts pounding out on the piano. And then they cut away and the sun's gone down and he's still pounding away the same melody on the piano. And his cousin comes up who is also in the band with him, and he stops and talks to him, says there's something here but I just can't get it. And they talk for a minute and then he starts playing the recognizable melody of Good Vibrations. And that's actually historical. That actually happened. So you see how it's creation-oriented? He's trying. There was something in his head. There was an idea in his mind, and he just kind of started playing the piano until it started to come out a little closer to what he was hearing in his head. Peter?
I see that with writing a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of people often will express, I'm not ready to write yet because I haven't fully formed my ideas.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I find that writing is the process of forming those ideas.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like, you're not going to get to that formation point until you just start writing. So,
Exactly.
Well, when you write, you see your ideas and you say, is that what I meant? And then you say, well, not quite. So what did I mean? And then you try again, and then you say, well, it's better, but not yet. It's a process of thinking.
So driving change through continual cycles of creation. One of the things I do when I write, I actually write in longhand occasionally because I think different thoughts, it seems like, when I write in longhand than when I'm typing in a keyboard. Charles?
So I was just going to say maybe the same could be said for sharing ideas with people,
Right.
Just getting an idea out, even if it's, half-baked or partially formulated.
Exactly.
Bouncing it off people, and you're in the process of creation.
Yeah. So you feel this in your design situations, right? That I've got to bake it before I talk about it because I don't want to look stupid. Have you felt that? We've all felt it. It's okay to admit it. We've all felt it. You're feeling it, right?
No, yeah. Maybe a historical example. Some people don't know that Beethoven is only opera. He actually wrote multiple versions of the overture. And so there's several different versions. They're not all exactly the same, but he worked until he liked it, but it debuted in several different formats.
Right.
And so that, to us, that sounds really crazy that you would let your product out until it was absolutely finished. But
Yeah.
he didn't see his work that way. But I think that nowadays we kind of put a lid on our creative abilities.
We've got to start talking about these things, getting them out there in any form at all. Was there another hand back here somewhere?
Yeah, so I just mentioned one of the things coming to my mind as we talk about this is the role that waste plays, or perceived waste plays in a creation-minded, oriented mindset. I think it's similar to how we tend to view failure in education. We don't appreciate failure. In the same way, to create requires you to do things that from the outside might be viewed as wasteful. Like if you go in an art studio, you see lots of different things that the person has started to create. You don't see one thing that they're working on and constantly perfecting.
Yeah.
You have lots of different things occurring, and it all feeds back into these final products.
And in fact, sometimes there'll be small versions, right? Like I remember the Carl Bloch exhibit a couple years ago. There are very small versions. They're fully formed, but they're not the huge, heroic-sized ones that he ended up with. So prototypes can be rough. They could be a sketch. But in his case, it was, a small note card-sized version of the entire thing, and then he made it big once he had some ideas. I've intentionally put some blank space on the handout. Just a little quote there to get you started, just saying, let's get started. Let's stop talking and start doing. Let's put some blank space there. I'm going to give you some note cards too. So let's pass out some of these note cards. We don't have time to really practice this one much, but take the note cards and just start doing. Just start writing down your ideas. Start creating them in some fashion. Not just with your projects, but with anything. If you walk into somewhere and you say, I can imagine this being different or better, sketch it out. Talk about it with somebody. Practice it and work on it that way. Just some examples. When I was at church headquarters, Elder Bednar actually gave us a really interesting challenge. He said, take Lehi's dream and see how many ways that you could teach that. And so we came up with 40, and we put them in a book. We called the book, What Beholdest Thou? A New Vision for Lehi's Tree of Life. A little play on words there. We had 40 ideas. We had a one-page write-up for each of the ideas, and then we also had a series of sketches for each of the ideas. And multi-path story, the vision quest, all kinds of fun things that came up. And we wanted to show them. And actually we refined ideas and threw out, if we couldn't draw the version of it, we actually threw it out. We started with more than 40, but some of them we just couldn't come up with a sketch for. And so we threw those out and presented him with those ideas. Well, the final discipline is collaboration. Oh, was there one more comment back there?
Sorry, just going back, that was just an interesting thought. I just kind of wanted to challenge or explore that a little bit. So you said because you couldn't sketch it, you threw the idea out.
just for our purposes then, I mean, that's not a best practice necessarily. It's not something I'd recommend in every situation. But for our purposes in that project, we had to limit ourselves somehow, and that's how we limited ourselves. Yeah. The last discipline is collaboration, particularly interdisciplinary collaboration. I couldn't tell you how thrilled I was to come and hear about all the really cool things that are happening in this program with interdisciplinary collaboration. I don't know that means I need to talk a whole lot about it. But the discipline, again, is what happens outside of your design situation as well as what happens inside of it. So what are you learning from people very different from you? Even if you don't see any connection to your work at all right now. That's not a public question, that's a reflection question. Meaning I want you to think about it and maybe change some behavior based on your thoughts, but you don't have to say it out loud. Did you know that there are 60-some departments on this campus? And that means that you could talk to someone from each of those departments, a faculty member, once a week and not exhaust the campus in the space of a year. Here's how to do it. Look up a department that you know nothing about. Find a faculty member. Look at their curriculum vitae. Find a paper they published recently. Get a copy of it. Read it. And then call a professor and say, I was reading your paper called this, and I'd like to come talk to you about it. And I don't think you're going to get told no. Faculty, are you going to tell anyone no if they do that to you? There's the magic phrase. I've read your paper called this, and I'd like to talk to you about it. And you couldn't be more welcome. They'll roll out the red carpet for you if you want to do that. And you'll learn just amazing things. And it may not apply to your work right now, but that's okay. The idea is you want to expose yourself to lots and lots of ideas. I want to share with you my friend Matt. Matt is a trauma nurse at the hospital here in Provo. I had a conversation with Matt over the weekend about nursing. And I've cut that down into just a few minutes that I want to play for you right now. And maybe write some things down on the bottom of the handout that you think are just interesting or important or ideas that you want to remember. The questions there, keep it casual. You know, this isn't, you're not trying to do research here, you're just trying to learn and enjoy. Why does he enjoy it? What's important about it to him? I'm going to apologize, the sound quality is a little strange because I can only get with him by phone, so you're going to hear kind of the tinny phone speaker. And I've got to start it and then come over here and adjust the volume. So we're going to make this work the best that we can. Okay, Matt, well, thank you for taking a few minutes this afternoon for this interview.
Yeah, I'm happy to.
This is totally unscripted.
Yes.
And there's no way we can be lying about that, right?
Right.
So nursing. So I imagine that someone like myself probably has some pretty out there, pretty absurd beliefs about nursing. Is that common? Do you find people that just kind of the common wisdom about nursing is kind of off from what you actually do?
One of the misconceptions that the public has is that nurses don't know everything that's going on, which in reality, I as a nurse usually know before the doctor does. I get the test results first, and I get to see kind of what's going on before he does. And so I have a kind of a first view of what's going on, and I'm limited on what I can say. That one of the misconceptions is that I don't know what's going on, and I'm just an order follower. When in reality, I sometimes know more about what's going on than anyone else.
So I'm going to admit that's kind of one of the misconceptions I've had before is that the nurse is kind of the, you change the sheets, you deliver the meds in the little cups, but it sounds like there's more medical knowledge involved. There's more involved to it than that.
Yeah, and one of the duties that comes with being a nurse is being an interpreter. So I have to know everything that the doctor is going to say and what he's thinking and be able to interpret that into the common language, right? Because if a doctor comes in and starts spouting off medical terminology and talks about the tests that we ran, most people aren't going to know the difference between a CBC and a BMT. So I've got to be able to break it down to the patient and say, this is what we're seeing and this is what's going on. Most everybody will just kind of nod and smile at the doctor. And when he leaves the room, a lot of people will hope that somebody can interpret what just happened. So that's kind of where I come in. So a lot of medical knowledge has to come in behind what I do. And then I have to also try to make you feel good about what's happening, right? One of the other duties of being a nurse is the comfy, feely side, and trying to make you feel comfortable and make you feel safe and at ease of what's going on. Even if my doctor doesn't have good bedside manner, I've got to try to make the situation good. And doing that while having to have the medical side behind it is a lot of what nursing does.
How routine are the things you see versus how unique? I mean, are there things that you tend to do again and again and you just kind of find yourself falling into patterns again and again, or is every situation really pretty unique?
The answer to that is yes. Everything's unique and everything's different. It's unique in the sense that every person that comes through is in a different situation. If we use the example of like appendicitis, people who come in with appendicitis are going to present the same way. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to have the same tests. We're going to start the IV in the same place kind of thing, right? So we're going to do similar things on similar diagnoses. But it's different in the sense that one patient's totally different than another, right? If it's a young boy or an older woman, if it's somebody that comes from a wealthy background versus a poor background. There's some routine and regularity in what I do, but there's some certainly unique things that, I may never see again.
So what are some of the things you heard?
You ask about patterns and routine versus unique, and that applies to a lot of different fields.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But it also emphasized the idiosyncratic nature of what's going on.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's both unique and the same is kind of the point he was trying to make, right? Appendicitis is appendicitis, but you're a different person. So there's some interesting ideas there that I think we could understand and learn from.
I think too that it not only helps you kind of defeat some of the stereotypes that you have, but it also helps them think about it in different ways. So they probably never sat there and thought is my job routine or is it unique all the time? And then thinks about it and he probably came to the realization, some parts are pretty standard, other parts aren't.
Yeah. Another hand somewhere, Peter?
Right, somebody who feels undervalued in what he does.
Yeah. Yeah, nursing is a profession where I think that happens quite a bit.
He's a translator and an ambassador and a comfort giver.
Yes.
All those different areas.
And I hope you noticed how casual my conversation was with him. I started by just kind of saying, I think this. Am I right? And that's okay. Because you're there to learn. You're not there to, you're not interviewing 50 people and needing to ask the same questions to each of them to make sure that your results are valid and reliable. You're just there to learn. And you're not going to offend people if they can tell that you're eager to learn. I said, I've heard that nurses just take orders, right? And he says, no, that's not at all what's happening. And it's okay, we can have that kind of conversation. Well, make the discipline yours. Make these 3 disciplines yours. Make other disciplines yours. This is about becoming a different person. We talk about that in education. We want students to develop a new identity. And as designers, you ought to be doing the same thing. Develop a new identity yourself. So whether these disciplines are valuable or not, I hope that you'll find habits that you can incorporate into your life that will help you achieve the goals that you really want to achieve and just live true to these ideals you have. You're here because you want to make a difference. You're here because you want to change people's lives. And so develop the habits and become the person outside of the project that will help you live up to those ideals in the project. So if I can use the terminology, as we've talked about today, go and do thou likewise. Thank you.